Learn with MS English. Speak English with confidence. Learn, practice, speak.
You know that feeling when you walk into a room, maybe it's like a highly specialized workplace or a hobbyist convention or even a foreign market, and everyone is technically speaking English, but it sounds like absolute nonsense.
So yeah, like you recognize the nouns and the verbs, sure, but the actual meaning is just completely flying over your head.
Exactly. It leaves you feeling entirely out of your depth.
Well, I mean, it is the ultimate barrier to entry, right? Every specialized world out there operates on its own highly specific vocabulary. And until you learn to speak it, you aren't just confused, you are actively locked out of the system.
Right. You can't participate, you can't negotiate, and you certainly can't win.
Exactly.
So today, we are cracking the code on 3 of those invisible languages. If you're listening to this deep dive, you're probably someone who likes to peek behind the curtain, to decode the world around you.
Yeah, that's why we're here.
And we've got a wild lineup. We're going to examine the high-stakes, super volatile mechanics of global currency markets. Then we'll shift gears into the psychological tricks that are embedded in astrology, of all things.
It's a bigger jump than you'd think, but it makes sense.
It really does. And then we'll finish up by decoding the strict, almost architectural rules of an Italian menu. Because the true mission of this deep dive today is mastering the systems of everyday life. Okay, let's unpack this.
So the most intimidating system we interact with daily is, without a doubt, the financial system. I mean, hands down. Let's look at the foreign exchange market, or Forex.
Right, Forex.
Yeah, and this isn't your standard stock market where you buy shares in a tech company or a retail brand. In Forex, money itself is the product.
That's the part that always trips people up.
Exactly. You are treating currencies, euros, Indian rupees, Chinese RMB, US dollars, just as commodities to be bought and sold.
But to even step onto that playing field, you have to decode the mechanics of the negotiation. Traders don't just, ask for a price. They deal in asking prices and bids.
Yes.
And there is a very deliberate mechanical difference between the two. Like, the asking price is the seller's opening salvo. If I'm holding a stack of RMB, my asking price is the absolute maximum I hope to extract from you.
Right. It's the dream scenario for the seller.
Yeah. And the bid is the counterweight.
Yep.
Is the buyer drawing a line in the sand, basically stating the exact non-negotiable amount they're willing to part with.
And the entire market basically exists in that tension between the ask and the bid. I mean, you buy a currency hoping for appreciation. And in this context, appreciation has literally nothing to do with gratitude.
Right. No one is writing a thank you note.
No, not at all. It is a strict mathematical increase in value. You acquire a currency when it's cheap, you wait for the global market to deem it more valuable, and then you sell it. Simple as that.
And when the value drops, you're looking at depreciation.
Exactly. But the vocabulary alone doesn't really explain the volatility of Forex. The real danger comes from the mechanism of how these trades are actually funded.
Oh man, the margin deposit. This concept is just wild.
It really is.
It's essentially like putting down a tiny deposit to rent a massive financial bulldozer. You aren't actually putting up the full capital for the trade. You might put down just a 1% margin.
Right.
So a $10 deposit allows you to control $1,000 worth of foreign currency. You are manipulating capital up to 100 times greater than what actually left your bank account.
Which, is an incredible lever for generating wealth. But let's look at the actual physics of that lever. If you control $1,000 with just a $10 deposit, what happens if the currency depreciates by just 1%?
Wait, I see where this is going. If it drops 1%, that's $10. So my entire initial deposit is just completely wiped out in a fraction of a second.
Yep, gone.
So who covers the other $990 if the market totally tanks?
See, that is the multi-million-dollar question, and it's exactly why margin calls trigger these cascading panics in the market. The broker forces you to deposit more cash immediately to cover the massive theoretical loss, or they just liquidate your position. It is high-wire financial acrobatics. But we also have to look at what happens when these abstract concepts like appreciation, depreciation, currency valuation, when they escape the trading floor and hit the real world on a national scale.
Oh, like the source material mentioned. Look at what happened to Ecuador in late 1998 and early 99.
Exactly, the hyperinflation crisis.
That is a terrifying example of a system completely breaking down.
It really is. We are talking about a scenario where a nation's currency, the sucre, depreciated with such velocity that it destroyed the fundamental mechanics of everyday survival.
It was moving so fast.
Yeah, the baseline was roughly 3,000 sucres to $1. And over a devastatingly short period, it plummeted to 25,000 sucres to a single dollar.
That's insane.
Huh.
People were walking around with literal physical bags stuffed with cash, and it was functionally worthless.
Yeah, and the central bank just couldn't absorb the shock of that depreciation. They lost the ability to regulate prices, but the citizens' salaries, they remained completely stagnant.
It's a mathematical death spiral.
Truly. So the government was backed into a corner where they had to make a monumental split-second decision. They basically had to abandon their own sovereign system.
Right. They scrapped the sucre entirely and adopted the U.S. dollar.
Yep. They replaced their national financial operating system just to stop the bleeding. I mean, if you travel to Ecuador today, you are handing over the exact same dollar bills you'd use in a coffee shop in Chicago.
It is just staggering to think about a sovereign nation just uninstalling its currency like it's a faulty piece of software.
It's wild.
But, while countries have central banks to deal with macro-level hyperinflation, individuals are entirely on their own. We need personal systems to build a firewall around our own wealth.
Definitely.
And there's this brilliant narrative illustrating this with a 27-year-old guy named Sam, who's been grinding away for 5 years with zero financial traction. And he meets a wealthy older mentor named Mr. Hayes.
Yeah, Sam literally wanders into Mr. Hayes' garden, basically searching for the architecture of wealth. And Mr. Hayes doesn't give him philosophy, right? He gives him a rigid mechanical system, the 5 rules of wealth.
Rule 1 is the immutable law of physics for personal finance.
Yeah.
Spend less than you earn.
Always.
If your salary is $5,000 a month, you must sequester $2,000 of that. It does not matter if you scale up to a 6-figure salary.
Yeah.
If your lifestyle inflates to match your income, you are just broke at a higher tax bracket.
Broke with nicer things. And Rule 2 is basically the shock absorber for Rule 1.
Right.
Keep an emergency fund. Because life is inherently hostile to financial planning.
Oh, absolutely.
You will face a leaky roof or a blown car transmission or a sudden corporate downsizing. And without that liquid safety net, the system forces you to borrow money at predatory rates or sell off your assets at a massive loss just to keep the lights on.
But Rule 3 is where the system actually demands active participation. Mr. Hayes tells Sam to invest in yourself.
Yeah.
I have to challenge that, though. Telling someone who is currently broke to invest in themselves feels, incredibly patronizing.
Oh, sure.
It sounds like one of those hollow platitudes you'd find on a corporate motivational poster. How does a guy who can barely afford rent practically invest in himself?
Well, it does sound vague until you look at the mechanics Mr. Hayes is actually proposing in the text. He isn't talking about, self-care or buying a fancy gym membership.
Right.
He's talking about aggressively increasing your market utility. If your trade is plumbing or carpentry, it means taking your marginal extra time and cash to master an adjacent skill. Buy specialized tools, take night courses.
Okay, that makes sense.
He even suggests studying your own boss, learning exactly where they source their raw materials, understanding the supply chain, and mapping out the business pipeline from top to bottom.
Oh, I get it. You are reverse engineering the business you work for so that you become indispensable. Or so you could eventually just compete with them. Which locks perfectly into Rule 4. Earn more. But the critical distinction here isn't just marching in and asking for a raise. It's fundamentally changing how the market values you.
Yeah.
You have to transition from being paid per hour of your time to being paid for the actual production you generate.
Because time is a finite resource, right?
Yeah.
You can only work so many hours in a week.
Right.
But production, the actual value you create, that can scale infinitely. If you work harder, smarter, and more efficiently, your earning potential detaches from the clock entirely.
And that detachment is what makes Rule 5 possible, creating passive income. Once you've mastered the first 4 rules, you redirect that capital to build a machine that works when you sleep.
Yes.
You buy a franchise, you invest in rental properties, you fund the business. You basically transition from selling your labor to owning systems that generate wealth independently of your physical effort.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture, human beings are just obsessive about building systems to manage uncertainty. We just deconstructed how we build financial systems to control our economic futures. But how do we handle the sheer, unpredictable chaos of our emotional and personal lives?
To invent prediction engines.
Exactly. We invent prediction systems.
And the most enduring prediction engine in human history is astrology. Now, we need to draw a hard line here for a second.
Fair enough.
Astronomy is the rigorous empirical science of the universe. The gravitational pull of planets, the composition of stars, astrophysics. Astrology, on the other hand, is a pseudoscience.
Right.
It is a psychological framework designed to predict your upcoming month or completely define your core personality traits based solely on the arbitrary coordinates of the calendar when you were born.
And just like global finance, it operates on a deeply embedded, highly specific vocabulary, the zodiac. It essentially divides the sky into 12 distinct zones, assigning an archetype to each.
Like, if your birthday lands on April 15th, the system categorizes you as an Aries, a fire sign. The blueprint dictates that you are inherently energetic, a fiercely social creature.
Yeah.
Contrast that with Capricorn, an earth sign. The system labels Capricorns as deeply serious-minded, relentlessly practical, and bound to conventional tradition. You also have Leo, the lion, who is outspoken and highly opinionated. And Taurus, the bull, categorized as immensely strong but fundamentally stubborn.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. In the source material, we have a scenario where two friends are reading their outlooks, basically the system's prediction for their immediate future.
Okay.
The first friend reads a forecast promising this exotic vacation and a passionate whirlwind summer fling. The second friend reads her outlook, which predicts an upcoming period of intense stress at work.
And the second friend immediately rejects it. She points out the glaring flaw. She doesn't actually have any stress at work, and her romantic life is entirely dormant. The prediction completely fails the reality test.
Right. But the first friend remains entirely captivated. She buys into the system completely. So why does a system with such an abysmal hit rate maintain such a powerful grip on human psychology?
It relies heavily on the Four effect, right?
Yeah.
It's the psychology of the language itself.
Exactly. The brilliance of the astrological vocabulary is its duality. It uses this clinical, authoritative phrasing, telling someone they match specific criteria or possess unconventional traits.
Yeah, it sounds almost like a psychological diagnosis.
Right, but beneath that authoritative tone, the actual descriptions are astonishingly vague.
Because telling a human being that they are occasionally stubborn or energetic is meaningless. Every person on the planet experiences stubbornness and energy depending on the day of the week, or honestly just how much sleep they've had.
True. But the system packages those universal human traits as a personalized revelation. The listener does all the heavy lifting.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah, when you hear a broad description, your brain automatically scans your recent memories to find specific evidence that proves the statement true. The horoscope isn't actually predicting your life. It is simply providing a blank mirror, and you project your own highly specific anxieties, hopes, and experiences right onto it.
So it basically functions as a social operating system.
Precisely.
Because navigating the messy, contradictory nature of human behavior is exhausting. It requires immense emotional intelligence. It is so much easier to bypass that hard work by just applying a label.
Oh, totally.
Instead of analyzing why a colleague is being difficult and exploring their underlying motivations, you just say, oh, they're being a classic stubborn Taurus.
Yeah.
You've instantly neutralized the complexity.
It is a vocabulary of comfort. It gives us an illusion of control over the unpredictable nature of the people around us.
And transitioning from the social scripts of astrology, we arrive at a system that provides literal comfort, but through incredibly strict physical rules.
Yes.
The dining experience. Because sitting down at a traditional Italian restaurant isn't just about eating, it is about navigating a highly specific geometry.
The culinary architecture of pasta.
Yes. When you really look at pasta, the underlying material is essentially static. It is dough, flour, water, maybe eggs. Occasionally, a chef might introduce spinach to alter the pigment, but the structural foundation remains identical.
Right. It's all the same stuff.
What completely transforms the identity, the texture, and the purpose of the dish is the shape.
The physical blueprint basically dictates the physics of the meal.
Yeah, let's look at the engineering they use. You have penne. These are rigid 3-centimeter long round tubes with a hollow center. You don't engineer a tube unless your goal is to trap something inside it, right?
Exactly.
It's designed specifically to capture thick, heavy viscosities, like a dense white cream mushroom sauce. The sauce hides inside the architecture.
Then you have fettuccine. This requires a completely different approach. It's a long noodle, but it's pressed completely flat, resembling a shoelace. That flat surface area is ideal for holding lighter coatings, like oil or butter, and it provides a bed for larger proteins, like jumbo prawns.
Contrast both of those with spaghetti, long, thin, and perfectly round, resembling a pencil or strands of hair. And then ravioli completely breaks the paradox.
Oh, ravioli is brilliant.
Instead of an exposed surface, it uses the dough to create a sealed square, like a little pocket or a pillow. The ingredients, usually dense meats or ricotta cheese, are entirely encased. The shape fundamentally alters the mechanics of chewing and tasting.
What's fascinating here is what happens when a tourist's expectation of that geometric system collides with deeply rooted regional tradition, because every specialized system has an outlier that shocks the uninitiated.
The horse tripe.
The horse tripe. Imagine sitting at a table, you confidently navigate the geometry, you order the prawn fettuccine, and your dining partner looks at the menu and orders the horse tripe.
Yeah, for someone expecting conventional pasta shapes, this is a massive system error. Because tripe is the stomach lining of the animal. It's this squishy, spongy, highly textured biological material. And in this specific case, it's sourced from a horse. To a lot of diners, that sounds like a dare, not a dinner.
But if you understand the broader vocabulary of Italian cuisine, you realize it isn't an anomaly at all. In parts of southern Italy, tripe is a celebrated conventional dish.
Really?
Yeah. It represents a historical necessity, basically using every part of the animal elevated to a culinary art form. It only feels shocking if your vocabulary is limited to the tourist menu.
Which highlights the absolute necessity of mastering the social negotiation of a restaurant.
Yeah.
When you are staring at a menu, trying to calculate the surface area to volume ratio of pasta shapes while actively avoiding squishy stomach linings, you need a guide.
You really do. You have to know how to interact with the system administrator. And that interaction begins the moment they approach the table and say, "I'll be your server tonight."
And it's worth noting the specific terminology there. They use server, the modern gender-neutral term, rather than waiter or waitress. They're establishing their role.
Right.
They aren't just there to carry plates. They're there to pilot you through the menu.
And when they finally ask, "May I take your order?" they are asking if you are ready to commit to your choices. If you feel out of your depth, there is an ultimate linguistic cheat code you can deploy.
Oh, I love this part. Do you have any recommendations?
It is the most powerful phrase you can use in a new environment. By asking that question, you are actively conceding power to the expert. You are admitting, "I do not fully speak the language of this kitchen."
Yeah, you transform the server from a transactional order taker into a curator.
Exactly. You are asking them to leverage their deep systemic knowledge to guarantee you a successful experience.
So what does this all mean? Today, we've dragged you through some wildly disparate environments, but the goal was to equip you to navigate the invisible architecture of the world.
We decoded the high-stakes, mathematical brutality of global foreign exchange and personal wealth building.
We exposed the psychological mirrors hiding inside the authoritative vocabulary of the zodiac.
And we explored the strict geometric rules and the occasional squishy realities of an Italian menu.
The connective tissue here goes back to that feeling of walking into a room and hearing absolute nonsense. Mastering any discipline, whether your objective is to protect your capital from hyperinflation, to understand why people desperately want to believe their horoscopes, or simply to order a meal that doesn't contain horse stomach, it always starts by mastering the vocabulary, the words of the blueprints.
I agree completely. And as we wrap up, I want to push that idea just one step further.
Okay.
We've talked about learning the vocabulary of human systems today, but right now, we are building artificial intelligence models that are beginning to communicate with each other in generated shorthand internal languages that even their original developers cannot decipher.
Wow.
It forces us to ask a deeply unsettling question. What happens to our society when the systems that govern our global markets, our logistics, and our daily lives no longer have a vocabulary meant for human ears at all?
That is a brilliant and honestly slightly terrifying thought to leave on. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. Keep questioning the hidden rules, keep decoding the systems around you, and we will catch you next time.